Welcome to Thriving with Mental Illness, a podcast with real talk, an open and honest conversation about issues surrounding mental health. There are no topics that are off limits and no questions that aren't okay to ask. I'm Mikkel Buck, author, public speaker, and suicide survivor who's lived with mental illness for over 20 years. And with me is my guy, Adam.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. We are so excited today. We've got a guest that we met at
the Hope Gives.
Yeah. We've talked about that on our podcast quite a bit. We absolutely loved it. And so we go to sit down and I think you reached out first. You said, "Hi, I'm Kim Buck." And I said, "Hey, I'm Adam Buck." Like, wait a second. So we had a good conversation. So welcome, Kim Buck, to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Yes, that was quite a shock. I think they must have thought we were related or something.
Like, we'll stick to relatives on the
I was wondering if we were related because, like you said, there's so few Bucks, I'm like, wait a second. Are we supposed to know each other?
I know, that was fun. So yeah, it was so nice to meet you too. And I'm glad to be here. And I guess just to give you a little introduction, my name is Kim Buck and I live here in Arizona, but I work as a mental health provider. I'm a licensed therapist. I work at Family Strategies Counseling Center in Mesa, Arizona. I've also authored a book this last couple of years ago on a new treatment model that I think we're going to talk more about today. So I'm here to do it.
Well, good. And when we were talking, you said that, now, did you write the book with Rob Weiss? Is that his name?
Yes, Dr. Rob Weiss is my co-author on the book. Yes. Okay. And the concept, he came up with the concept, and he was in a dissertation program or a PhD program doing his dissertation work on this topic. And when I heard his oral defense, I was working, doing a lot of clinical work at the time, and I immediately resonated with it and started rewriting a lot of the curriculum at my office using that perspective. And then I got a hold of him and said, "Can I use it?" He had trademarked it, and he said, "What are you doing and what and how much have you written?" And it just all evolved into he and I. Then I did my dissertation work on the development of the actual model as a treatment model. And Rutledge Taylor Francis found out. Dr. Rob is pretty well known. This is book 12 or something for him. So he's written a lot, and he's well known in their field. And they were excited to pick up a new treatment model. So that's how it's evolved. It was published in 2022. And
what's the name of it?
It's called Practicing Codependence, the clinical alternative to codependence treatment. So that is the official name. It's technically an academic work. It is available on all the major, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but it's listed at Rutledge as one of their academic pieces. So graduate programs can pick it up and make it part of their curriculum for therapists.
That's really cool because this is kind of like the new direction here. And when we met you, I was so fascinated. And honestly, it took me a minute. And also I kept stumbling over my words, which I did before. I'm like, codependency. And you're like, no, prodependence, codependency, prodependence. I'm like, wait, what? Anyway, we got it all cleared out. Prodependence, everybody. Prodependence.
Yes.
Well, and I thought as we were planning this, I'm like, I think I'll try to, because it's very academic. I mean, some of the stuff that you do is very academic, and we may or may not have academics listening.
Strictly academics.
And so I'm like, maybe we have to dumb it down. And I thought, I think
I'm like, the fact explaining it to the two of us, I'm like, we're all the way dumbed down. We got it. We got it now.
So I'm going to pretend we're going to dumb it down for the audience when it in fact is for me. So if you'll indulge us to maybe go.
Well, you guys are no slouches for sure. I've read some of your work and it's amazing. I actually think this is a very easy. I mean, it's a treatment model that therapists, I'm hoping all over the world, will pick up who are working in mental health, and particularly with individuals who are in the supportive role of those who are struggling. So
we were talking about at the event, individuals who are supporting their spouse, their child, their friend, whoever, that is dealing with mental illness. And you were talking about, how those people can receive help or support as they're being the support as well.
Well, and we get a lot of questions because we're always asking for questions and topics that people are wondering about. And if it's practical things, like we always will give our 2 cents on the practicality of living with it. But there are a lot of questions that really need professional answers. And that's what we try to do, is bring on qualified professionals like yourself to give good answers. So it's not just like the two of us being ninnies. Like, oh, what do you think? Like, no, we want this to be very valuable. So yeah, there's a lot of questions from our listeners saying, what do I do? My spouse doesn't want to get treatment. Like, I don't know how to make this marriage work. So many questions, and those are absolutely not questions that we are equipped to answer. So I'm so excited for you to talk about this model, and then also address like some of those specific things that so many of our listeners have.
For sure. And I think that the population, the supportive population, if you will, are highly misunderstood and oftentimes miscategorized, mistreated. This is why codependence came about. In my opinion, and this is opinion of mine over all the years I've been a clinician, but the only model we had was a codependence model. This idea that if one person's suffering, one person's sick, then the whole family's sick. It was a family systems kind of model. And it came out of the women's movement of the 80s, love, let go and love from afar, don't be part of the sickness. And if you're paired with somebody who's struggling, then you're sick too. It was a really derogatory message and a really hurtful message to people oftentimes who are just trying to save someone they love. So to walk into somebody's office and them to say, okay, well, what's wrong with you? Why would you be with this person is really counterintuitive, in my opinion, and counterproductive to somebody who's, in a crisis, not of their own making. Yeah. They're dealing with a crisis because they love somebody who's suffering, and they may be making horrible decisions and, causing harm to the relationship or themselves. And I'm not saying that the supported person always does it correctly. That's for sure. They're in crisis. They may make really bad decisions, but how we treat and support them matters. And there has not been a new model since the 70s, 60s, when codependence came on the scene. Yeah. So prodependence is a play on words. It's pro-dependency. So we're really talking about healthy interdependence and not making dependency, meaning the need to be or pair with somebody, a pathology, a problem, a diagnosis. Yeah. We have a DNA imperative to pair bond and to love the people that we are with. We might need to do that in a better way, in a healthier way, but it doesn't mean we're sick because we're paired with someone that's sick. So I love, Dr. Rob uses this analogy a lot where he says, if somebody has a loved one who is diagnosed with cancer, that loved one who's loving the person with cancer might quit their job. They might gain weight. They might start not sleeping or eating correctly. They might do everything in their power to save the person that they love that has cancer, try and read everything they can read, do everything they can do, but nobody would ever call them sick.
Right.
In our culture, we would call them a hero.
Yeah.
But yet when you're paired with mental illness, somehow we have to look at it so negatively and pathologically instead of just saying, they might not be going about it in the right way, but they're just trying to save the person they love. So prodependence is a attachment-based, meaning we're really focused on the need for healthy attachment and the need for healthy interdependence between two people, and not detaching with love. That just creates a lot of very lonely people who are lonely and on their own.
Well, and it feels like you said, that would be very damaging. I know when I was going through the thick of it, like after a suicide attempt, if you had gone into a counselor and they said, dude, you need to love her from afar, snip, snip, she's out of your life. You know what I mean? That would have been like, what? Not that I mean, things were hard. I'm not denying that they were very hard, and they were very hard on you as well. But I have a hard time thinking that would have been good advice for the two of us, or you even specifically. I don't know.
I don't think that's how codependence was intended to be when it started. It started, back in the 40s, and when the big book and when the big book of AA and AA started, you know, we started trying to help partners of alcoholics and try and figure it out. And codependence was, that whole term, I think, was meant to help people have healthier behaviors inside the relationship, but it sort of evolved to everybody's codependent, right? Like you're
Yeah.
codependent. I hear it in passing all the time. Oh, they're so codependent. They just can't stay away from her boyfriend. I'm like, well, is she in love with him? Is that like, what's the story? You know, maybe she's doing it in a healthy way, but maybe we shouldn't just create a big old bucket that's a category and stick everybody in it because we don't know what else to call it. And so we're just suggesting maybe we just call it love. And we just need to learn how to love correctly and in the most effective, healthy way. But we just can't love too much. I don't know who came up with that concept. It's a very catchphrase concept, but Dr. Rob often says, if you're the person that loves too much, here's my home address and my phone number, you know, be in my life, because I need more people who do that. But we can love incorrectly, or maybe no love is deserved, maybe love the wrong person for us, but we can't love too much. That's a codependent concept, that, or a codependency concept that has infiltrated our field, and we're just trying to unravel it and try and do it from a little healthier, non-shaming, non-pathologizing perspective.
So what would you say, like if someone were to come into you that's like really going through the thick of it with somebody they love, what are the most common, I don't quite know the right way to say it, but what are the most common things you see that are loving incorrectly? Is that what you say it, or maybe just not as healthy?
They might be doing more than is healthy for them. They might be, you know, not taking care of themselves, not, you know, it's that whole concept of trying to give from an empty place, or, you know, trying to help people.
Airline with
Yeah, the mask, putting other people's mask on before mine. So it might look something like that. And, you know, it might mean I need to set some really difficult boundaries, because, you know, the injury to me is more than what I can manage, you know. So it can look like a lot of things, but one thing I know for sure is most loved ones that come and see me are in a state of crisis. So they're pretty traumatized, they're pretty scared, they're pretty anxious, they're nervous, they're uncertain. So the very last thing I would do is start talking to them about their relationship with their father growing up, because, or I mean, why would I do that? It doesn't matter. They're here to deal with the crisis. So what we do is we start mitigating the crisis. We start stabilizing, start validating their efforts, but start helping them. Okay, what's healthy for you and what's not? Let's create some stabilization, some grounding. Let's, you know, we don't even go to boundaries yet, where that's down the road when our brain is like functioning properly. Because as we know, when we're in trauma, our brain isn't, you know, we're not in higher functioning. We're not up in the prefrontal cortex. We're in our fight and flight and freeze. And so whether you're dealing with mental illness, or whether you're dealing with addiction, whether you're dealing with your loved one who is failing in some way, that will send us into a crisis mode. So we treat the crisis first.
Yeah.
And we just stabilize the crisis. And then we start figuring out, now what do we need to do? I always say, if it's a good idea today, it's a good idea tomorrow. So I never push people into a decision mode. I just say, if it's a good decision, it'll always be a good decision. Let's just take care of you for a minute and catch your breath and see what you need to do. So it sounds really simplistic when I say it, but it is not what's been going on behind closed doors therapeutically, historically, for that population.
So would you say that some people could actually be harmed, or it could be problematic to see the wrong therapist or get the wrong advice about how to handle this?
Absolutely. I wish that wasn't the case.
Right.
But, and I think people will take codependence. You call me anything and I'll just call me any name, but help me.
Right.
When we're going into therapy, we're like, I don't care. Call me whatever you want to call me. Just help me get better. Like, help me help my loved one. Help me, you know, help me be able to breathe every day. And so I do think harm's caused. I don't think I don't think that it's malicious.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
more intentional. I would never. Yeah.
Most therapists are there to help, and they really want
Yeah.
to. But I do think we tend to be stubborn creatures sometimes. We get set in our ways, like the human condition, and we think we know. And I just challenge therapists all the time. When we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
And I thought codependency was a great idea until I didn't, until I had their way to look at it. And now I know something better. I do it different. And it's just a very simplistic turn. You just do it, you approach the person in a very different way. So it's not a hard turn, but there's people who are just bought into what they do.
Yeah.
But I would tell people, when you go in to see a therapist, it doesn't matter if you're the struggling person or you're the person who's supporting. You got to give them a few sessions to know if they're right for you. But if it just doesn't resonate with you, it's okay. You should be trying out therapists till you find the one that helps you. And I'm not for everybody. I tell that to them all the time. Give me a test run. I'll tell you what I'm good at. But if I'm not the person for you, go find somebody who is, or I'll help you find somebody who is. So,
well, that's been your experience too, right?
Yeah.
There's been some that you've resonated with, and others that
there's been a few I'm like, and we're not going to continue. So
you should ask them how they see the world, and how they treat things, what's their specialties, what kind of training have they got. You should absolutely interview them.
What do you think good questions are to ask somebody who's looking for a therapist, for somebody who's a good fit for them?
I think those questions that I just said, you ask them, what is your experience? What do you typically treat? What kind of trainings do you have to treat those issues? And those are the main ones, I would say. What are your specialties? What kind of training do you have to treat them? How do you see somebody who has that issue? Sometimes they'll ask, do you have any personal experience? And sometimes I will say yes. I don't go into detail because my own family system, I'm a public figure, so I'm not protected. My people aren't protected, but I'll say, yes, I do. I don't ever teach anything I'm not familiar with or pontificate about something that I haven't personally experienced.
Yeah.
I mean, my experience is different than yours, but interview your therapist for sure. And then if they do not have specialty training, let's say I'm getting treatment for bipolar disorder, you want to make sure your therapist has treated that, they understand what it is, they have resources, and they can resource you appropriately, and they have some knowledge base there, not generalized. I went and got a master's degree and got a license. You really do want more than that.
Yeah.
And comfortability.
Yeah.
I think that's something. Do you just kind of vibe with them? Do you like talk? Because you're going to spend a lot of time talking to them. So
yeah,
it's true. And a lot of money.
Yeah. Some people just get along, and some people just have different communication styles.
Very true.
My big one that I like, one of the very first therapists I had ever gone to, I didn't know what to expect from therapy at all. And so I go in, I didn't know questions to ask. I didn't know anything. It was a long ways away. It was like an hour away from where I lived. So I drove in there, got into the office, and after an hour, I had to make a quick stop in the restroom and get a drink. So I came back in and did that and sat down. And then the therapist called me in, and I sat down, and he sat and looked at me for a long time. And he said, so I noticed when you got here, you went to the restroom and you got a drink. Why was that? And I said, because I was thirsty and I had to go to the bathroom. And he said, are you sure it's not because subconsciously you were nervous about our appointment and so delaying our meeting? And I said, no, I'm pretty sure it's because I had to go to the bathroom. And then it went downhill from there. And then he's like, where did you? And then I kind of stopped talking because I'm like, dude, I don't know what's happening here. And then he's like, where did you
not working for me?
You're deep down inside. And I was like, bye-bye. That was like 5 minutes in, not even 5 minutes in, but I was like, yeah, we're not going to get along. I can already tell.
Well, I'm glad you listened to your instincts. And it's true. And then person number 5 could walk through his door and he asks the same question, and they're, oh yes.
Yeah.
So I don't have all the answers. I'm not the therapist, like I said, for everyone, but I do a lot of training of therapists, and I tell them all the time, you don't take this personally. You are who you are. You see what you see, but your job is to make sure that you can meet them where they are and that you have the training that's appropriate for their issue. Otherwise you find somebody who does. And you work in your scope of practice. That's one of the most important, and there's a lot of people, sometimes you think someone comes to the door and or for an issue to get help with, and it evolves into things that they didn't even see, coming in. Then that's not uncommon. I just believe that we should look at what we have in front of us first. I'm an analyst. We all are analysts by nature, but so if I have a partner, for instance, coming in or a loved one, I'm not thinking, I wonder if they had a weird relationship with, their mom growing up, and that's why they married this person.
Right.
Who knows? I don't know. I just know they're in crisis, so I'm going to help them with the crisis. And if that's relevant down the road, we'll deal with it then.
Well, I wanted to bring up something that you'd mentioned, and I have also read. So I think there's a website that because I was looking at Prodependence, and I saw the website, I saw a video, I think of Dr. Rob talking about some things. And interesting, so the video he was talking about maybe some of the negative words that codependence that we've put on people. And it was fascinating to hear, because I've heard these words, but I don't know what they mean. But like you were saying, people use them all the time, like in everyday language, like, enable or, and so he goes down this list and he's like, well, what if instead of saying that, we said this? And it was very, as I listened to it, I could see how it could be very negative if somebody was labeled as enabling versus you deeply care about the person. I mean, that's a big difference. One, you feel like you kind of
when you feel like
up.
a rock star. The other one, you feel like a little bit embarrassed or something.
Like you're doing something wrong and you should feel bad about it and you need to change and be different.
It's shame. There's a lot of shame label. Yeah. And I don't think that, again, I don't think that was intended, but I hear these words overused and misused a lot. Enmeshment can happen. We can be overly involved with it to a degree that's unhealthy, but usually we do that because we're deeply involved, because we care deeply for that person, like you were saying. Those kind of switching that language, like I said, it sounds pretty simple, but when you're sitting with somebody in crisis, it really matters. If I say to somebody, wow, it seems like you're just really lacking boundaries and very enmeshed with this person. How long have you been this codependent? Like, when did that start? It's going to sound very different than to say, wow, it makes sense why you're so deeply involved. You care a lot about this person and you married them thinking that it would be one way and it's another.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you be in crisis? It sounds like a small shift, but for somebody in that situation, it is kind of earth moving for them. They can, because they're not fighting me and trying to, they're not a sick person.
Right.
That's the last thing they need to do. So I'm already on their side.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for the problem with them.
Yeah.
They may have problems. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm not looking, they didn't come for me to diagnose their problems. They came to have me help deal with the loved one and what's going on in their family, in their life, in their relationship. And so you truly meet them where they are. And most people, if you can join with them in that way, right in the very beginning, you're going to be able to make movement. You're going to be able to really help them. There's going to automatically be a rapport and a trust because they know you can see them how they really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these things, like we did in the book, there's like codependent language, prodependent language. I think that's probably what Dr. Rob was referring to, where, instead of enabling, we're supporting, instead of fearful, we're concerned.
Yes.
Like kind of that up. And in my experience, since I've been using prodependence in my own practice clinically since 2018, it has been transformative to my practice and I realized how people come in not on edge, not ready to put their dukes up with me. I'm like, when you're pathologizing somebody who didn't come for that, you're going to have a problem. But most people will take whatever you give them because you're the expert and they're trying to get better and they're trying to, save somebody they love. So it's just a very I think codependence was easy. There's 400 and whatever books on it on Amazon. So, it's been written about, it's been around a long time. And I always say we stand on I stand on the shoulders of those early, because we know what we know. We learned there was a lot of good things that came out of the codependency movement, as far as understanding that we need treatment when I'm in that place, and I need to set healthy boundaries and have good self-care. And some of that came out of that codependency, but then there was other stuff that wasn't so nice.
Well, when you were responding saying, this is the difference in the language, if somebody came in and I would have responded this way versus now I know when somebody comes in and I respond this way. The second way, I'm like, I want to be this lady's best friend. That's what I would feel like if I had told you something that was hard, that especially that I'm struggling with, that I don't know what to do and I need help. And you said that to me, I would immediately be at ease and feel like I can trust everything she says, because number one, she cares. If you had told me the other one, again, like you said, I would like have my dukes up a little bit and be like, what you want to fight? And I'm kind of guessing that the people around them, like, bless all of our hearts when we try to help everybody, especially for layperson, and not like, we're not professionals, we're not educated in this. So we're trying to help the best way they can. But I do know that most of the time we botch it up because we're not professionals. And so everybody in their lives is probably like, why in the world are you hanging out with this? Like, leave it, dump him, what's going on here? And like, so they're having to defend it every single place they go. And if they come in and you're a safe space that, oh, okay, now I can really figure out how to help myself and get myself back on track, and hopefully us back on track. But if nothing else, at least I know that I'm going to be helping myself.
Such a good point, and so true, because people, and I always tell people too, and I believe this is true with anybody in crisis, you should not be making any major life decisions about anything when you're in a state of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say good idea today, good idea tomorrow. Like, let's get you out of the clouds. Let's get back on the ground. Let's get you some, some. But when you do that, and I'm not automatically going into pathologizing and over analyzing this person, yes, you're right. I'm hoping to create that safe space where I'm joined with them. Like, of course you're freaking out. This is a person you love. You married them. You clearly, or this is your son or your daughter. You are highly invested in their success in life, or you built a family with them, or you have kids with them. Of course, you're going to be freaking out if they're not doing well.
Yeah.
So let's figure out how to manage your freakouts. Let's figure out what to do, to make it. And so you have some big decisions in your future. No matter what those decisions are, you don't have to worry about them today. Unless they're obviously in an unsafe place or something, and we have to do that. But most of the time we can just play it out, create some healing and some grounding, and get them in a place where they're back in the part of their brain that is higher functioning, and they can make those big important decisions once that crisis is passed. So
yeah.
And sometimes it's chronic crisis. There's sometimes addiction. For instance, I work with addiction a lot, which is a chronic mental disorder that tends to crop back up. And so, you resource them, you help them understand this. If this reoccurs, you're going to panic. This is, we're going to panic when someone we love fails, but here's your tools. Here's your, here are your strategies. Here's your connections. Here's your community that will help you through before you make any of those big decisions, or, and that's, Dr. Rob says all the time, we don't heal our trauma, we manage it. And I don't know if I 100% subscribe to that, but I do think that there's some truth in that. We all come with our injuries.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say if somebody's in the middle of going through a freak out crisis right now, and they're not all the way in with a great counselor they trust? What would be a couple easy tools that you would recommend right off the bat?
Number one, get connection. Find one or two or three people that you can totally trust, that will not steer you any direction toward or away, or, that they will just be there unconditionally to listen to your pain. Life is 90% less painful when we have connection, and when we're dealing with hurt within a connection. That would be the first thing is connection. And the second is just to breathe. Give yourself time. Like I said, that little saying I say all the time, I know you want to run. I know you want to go put a tracker on his car. I know you want to, whatever you want to do, but let's just take a breath. Is that's a good idea? We can do that if that's what you need to do down the road. But today you just need to breathe, take care of yourself, get rest, eat, basics. We stick to the basics. Sounds weird, but when you're in crisis, we're not doing those things. We're not doing like looking at one of the first things I give people is this balance sheet where I'm like, okay, you're going to do one thing every day for your body intentionally, physically. You're going to do one thing for yourself spiritually, whatever that means for you. You're going to set one goal to accomplish every day relationally for connection. And one thing you do personally every day, and that would be the things that make you, your hobbies, your interests. And we are going to stick to that. I call those dailies, and they create a ground, they create a foundation because I'm being intentional about my own care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then, as life piles on us, might get a little hairy, but we've got our ground under us because we're taking care of the basics.
Yeah.
So those are two things that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah. I feel like when you talk about managing, and Dr. Rob, subscribing, saying we just manage stuff, I really resonate with that because my bipolar, that's something that I'm going to live with and that I'm managing really for my life. And most of the time I manage it quite well. There's hairy times. Yep. Just like any other time. But it's interesting how many of those same things are the same things to care well for myself while treating my bipolar disorder versus anyone else who's in crisis. Like these are just good ideas for every single person, everybody.
That's right. It doesn't matter the issue that I treat, whether I'm treating a mood disorder or a partner or an addict, or it doesn't matter. That's foundational. Bottom line, you have to get connection. You will not do this alone. And there's not enough money or time in the world for it to be me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always say connection is protection, because it protects you. It creates a net for you when, and it's hard. Sometimes you got to really work at nurturing relationships that can be unconditional and consistent and
especially, when you're in crisis, the tendency is to withdraw. The tendency is to, I don't want people to see what's going on. So I'll close my door. I'll stop answering the phone. I won't go to parties. I won't go to this event. You're just like,
when anyone asks,
I'm
fine. Are you fine?
It's true. Our instinct is to do that.
Yeah. And so inadvertently you're compounding the problem and you don't realize it. You're thinking you're helping the problem, but you're making it worse.
Right. And most of us have people in our life that we love who have struggled in various ways, and you're trying to get in. You're like, you don't even have to do anything. Just let me in. Just let me just sit in this space with you and hold your pain with you. I can do that. Yeah. I won't fix you. I won't tell you what to do, but they won't let you in. Yeah. You're like, okay, well, that's your choice.
Well,
I've been on both sides of that where I don't want other people in because I know what a mess this is on the inside. I'm like, trust me, you're not going to want to be here. And then I've been on the other side too, like especially parenting kids through some pretty challenging years with, dealing with their own mental illnesses. I'm like, I am on your team. I promise you, I am never going to be critical. I'm never going to be hard on you. I am always on your team and I'm here to make it easier for you. However that looks, even if it looks hard, we're going to do it. So I definitely see both sides on that. And it's a lot easier when I have people in my life. I no longer do that one now. That was earlier on. Now I'm like, come on in, the more the merrier.
I think it's just interesting that our first instinct is to withdraw when really most of the stuff we deal with has a lot to do with attachments and early attachments. Mm-hmm. So when we recognize my instinct is to withdraw, that's my wound talking, that's my attachment talking, or my attachment stuff, which I really need to move towards, in safety, move towards people who I can trust. And you're right, that instinct is often just the opposite. But then when I find somebody and I get somebody in my corner that I feel unconditionally cared about or loved by, the whole world takes on a different, color.
Yeah.
There was a study done by a researcher years ago. Cohen was the last name, and they did these shock treatments, and they brought a stranger in to hold their hand. Oh no, they did the shock treatments by themselves, and their pain was at like 100. It was terrible. They brought a stranger in to hold their hands, and it reduced the pain by 50%.
Wow.
They brought someone they loved or knew them in to hold their hand, reduced the pain by 90%.
Wow.
Really fascinating when it comes to support and pain and connection. So I really can't overstate that enough. If I'm working with somebody with some chronic addiction problem, if they're in relapse, I'll almost always say, so tell me about your connections. And they'll just look at me with the same blank stare every time. Like, oh, yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, we can't do this alone. And so they get reconnected, and they get accountability and support, and their life turns that corner, and they find sobriety again. They find their ground again. So I think most of the things that ail us that are not purely physiological oftentimes come from attachment. They just come from the need to have that bonding, that unconditional connection. And when we find it, life is much less painful.
It's something you said. Oh, did you want to?
Well, that's okay. You can go and then I can.
Okay. Something you said resonated with me as the support, person. It really is more of like a marathon. And I think support people get in trouble when they're trying to sprint. They're trying to do an intense, I'm going to fix this
intervention
quickly. And they throw energy and money and just ridiculous amounts of resources, just jam it all together to try to fix the problem. And it doesn't fix the problem. And they're spent financially, they're spent emotionally. And I think, your advice, look, take care of yourself, because this is a long haul. You need to have reserves. We're not in a quick sprint here. You're going to need energy. You're going to need money. You're going to need all these resources for the long term to be a good support. So don't blow it all right out of the gate
in the first 12 weeks.
Yeah, just you got to pace yourself. And like you said, it's not everything doesn't have to be done right now. You can be patient, and you can let things progress, and you can, I'm not saying ignore it, but be more, I guess, logical and wise with the resources you have.
Right. And when, people in a supportive role kind of do take care of themselves and do that, they find themselves in a position where they don't take things as personally. They might be hurt, they might be sad, they might be scared, understandably, but it's not as personalized. It doesn't feel like it's, and so that's always my cell, and a large measure for, pro-dependence and support people they need those tools, they need those strategies, because it will help you, like you said, in the long run, handle those bumps in life, and they will come. It's not it.
Yeah.
And mental illness likes to do its thing. It likes to turn corners and morph into things. But when we are resourced and we are clear, well, this is not about me, and I'm doing my dailies, I'm taking care of, and I've got good support I can turn to. I think one of the reasons why people don't go to support too is because they don't want their partner or their loved one to be judged. I don't want to tell people what my husband's doing, or my wife's doing, or my kids doing, or whatever, because so that, to me, it states the importance of safety. Don't jump in the deep end. You have to be building and nurturing those relationships.
Yeah.
There's not a crisis, so they're there when you need them.
That actually leads right into my question that I was wanting to ask. What would be your recommendations to build and nurture those healthy and safe relationships too? Because I know if I'm telling anybody about my deepest, darkest secrets, I'm free to tell anybody because this is my information. You, however, are not free to utter a word to anyone on the face of the earth unless I say so. You know what I mean? That to me is safety. And in the beginning, when I was not so open about the things that we were going through, my suicide attempt, living with bipolar disorder, I didn't want other people knowing that yet. So it was very hard to gauge who I could talk to, which is why I talked to no one, because like, I don't know.
Like the risk was too great.
Right. The risk was too great. If you start blabbing all of this stuff, I'm not going to be okay.
Right. I'm already struggling. Last thing I need is, to deal with betrayal in that way. Yes, 100%. So my recommendation would be very simple. We build relationships, like we look at those like a marathon too. I'm shocked sometimes I meet somebody and I just know right away they're going to be my friend, right? But that is so rare.
Yeah.
It's usually a nurtured over time. So, and I also tell people, don't jump in the deep end. Like when you start meeting people, take them to lunch and give them one piece of information that's not going to be life altering, like you could live with it if it got out,
Yeah.
You give them that information and you see how safe are they?
Yeah.
Are they able to maintain my confidence and be a vault for me? And am I a vault for them? And then you you up the ante a little as time goes on.
Yeah.
You start tell them a little bit more, and then you might have a friend for life. But I always say this kind of friendship requires reciprocity. It has to go both ways or it feels terrible. Nobody wants to be the sick one. That no one wants to be the project all the time. Like, oh no, here's Kim again. He's a big problem child. Like I also want to be the one holding that space for other people too. So my relationships that are most meaningful have deep reciprocity. They go back and forth.
Yeah.
They call me. Those are lifelong, sometimes nurtured relationships, but we have to start somewhere. So I tell people, look in your circle. Look at where you go to the gym. Look where you go to church. Look where you go. I don't know, like look in your neighborhood, look at your kids' friends, like, but start picking people and start nurturing. And see what happens. Most times you end up picking people who can relate for whatever weird reason we find each other. I don't know what that means, a law of attraction or something, but we find people that'll be like, oh my gosh, I've had that struggle too. Or, my sister has that struggle. I'm so glad you told me because it helps me understand,
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer, but.
Well,
so helpful.
We've talked about it. Sometimes the people you trust have been through the exact same thing. But sometimes they've just been through a really hard thing. It was a different hard thing, but hard things have similar qualities to them.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to be exact matches, but everybody that I can think of that we trust,
that we're close to,
they've gone through their own hard things.
Yeah.
And when you go through difficult things, you become a different person, I think.
Oh, yes. Hopefully, you do. Sometimes people are like, I wish I could have learned this another way, but I learned this way, But yes, you're right. It kind of, when we're open, we invite open. When we are not judgmental, we invite non-judgmental. I really believe we invite what we do ourselves. So I always say, look inward first, look at your own, what kind of friend are you? And you want to develop into the kind of friend you need, because you'll attract that when you become what it is that you need. So I think that's just a really important point.
There was one thing I wanted to circle back to. You had talked about establishing healthy boundaries. And so Mikkel and I, we've never like really hashed this out in therapy or anything like that.
Oh, good. Are we doing it now?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So right now. But because I'm trying to think about, I think that could be misconstrued in a detrimental way. Because I hear people say that all the time. On social media, I need to establish healthy boundaries, and which to them means cut somebody off and belittle them. And so I think the word, establishing boundaries has evolved into something that I don't think
it's evolved into a weapon many times. From things that I've seen, I love on the one hand that there is so much awareness and so much talk around mental illness and different topics to keep ourselves mentally well and mentally healthy. So I love that aspect. But I think the opposite side of that is sometimes frustrating for me is it feels like every single person has a traumatic incident, and sometimes it's just life. There are hard things, and so I don't ever want to minimize something that is truly like life altering traumatic, but I also don't think like the boyfriend you had in high school who didn't like you back, like that's just life. I don't think that that one's traumatic. And I don't know if that's like small minded of me to not appreciate how hard everything is for everybody, but I feel like we're taking a lot of these counseling terms and applying them again with our well-intentioned but layman's knowledge of them, and then spreading them out and causing harm.
I think you guys are so right. As a mental health professional, I am always flabbergasted with the amount of diagnoses that people get off of Google. And I'm like, whoa, is it Dr. Google? What did Dr. Dr. Podcast say? Like, I'm like, why don't we just start from square one and let me actually evaluate and make sure? Because I think you're right. I think we throw terms around, and like you said, I'm glad that we're more aware, socially aware of these issues. But I think that comes with the other side. I mean, I work with single young adults like 18 to 30, and I am shocked. They tell me all the time, well, I'm this and that, and I've got that, and I'm, and I'm anxious, but I'm highly anxious, but I'm pretty sure I have, severe anxiety, depressive disorders, that maybe dysthymia. I'm like, what? Did the doctor tell you that? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, okay. So how do we, I agree. Things like going back to boundaries, Adam, your question is interesting. Boundaries are such a crucial thing we have to learn, but we have to understand what we're doing, like what it means. So often I'll hear people say, well, like you said, I just need a boundary. I just need to, not have that conversation. I'm like, well, you're not having that conversation because you're uncomfortable or because it's unsafe, because boundaries are about safety.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's because I think back when we were struggling and Mikkel was struggling and I'm struggling to figure out how to help, and I don't know how to help. And
thank you for saying that we were both struggling.
Yeah.
Instead of just like Kel was having a go of it. I was amazing, by the way.
No, I mean, this is our first rodeo. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I don't know if I'm doing it right. But if I'm just imagining if I'm like, you know what, I just need to set some boundaries with my wife. I need to
You can't call and cry on the phone if you're having a hard day because I'm busy. I'm at work. I'm a working man.
I need to establish these boundaries. You cannot call me when I'm at work, and I feel like this is going to help me be a better person and be healthier. So I'm going to set this boundary. Don't talk to me while I'm at work.
I think I would have started cussing earlier in my life. I'm real sorry, babe. I don't think it would have been helpful.
Does it make sense? You've got a crisis going on, like you said, it might be uncomfortable. It might be inconvenient. It might be, and that boundary maybe, I don't know. I'd have to, flesh it out. But I hear what you're saying. Like, and I also think people are not, there's two things. Boundaries are one of my favorite things to talk about and to teach, because they're so highly misunderstood. You cannot set a boundary for someone outside of you until you are super clear about how you violate yourself, other people. So people are like, well, I'm gonna set a boundary with him and her. And I'm like, really? So let's talk about the ways in which you might not, that you might violate other people's space, their ideas, their things, their feelings. Right. And when we start turning the mirror back, once I'm clear and I have a good idea about what limitations I should put on myself so that I'm not causing harm to the people around me, suddenly external boundaries, what I need from other people, become very clear. They're not just control wrap blanket, so people always want to learn boundaries from me, and I'm always like, that's fine. So tell me in the ways that you might do things that are uncomfortable for others. Tell me about physical space. Do you touch people without them asking? Do you give advice without them wanting it? Like, do you not return
like, this is about me.
Excuse me. That is not what we're here for.
Not about me. But most people who are wanting, they're like, I've never thought of that. And I go, right. So any external boundary you want to set, whether it's, please don't call me at work or whatever, will just come across as control and mean and disregarding to the other person, because it's probably not a boundary. It's probably a reactionary, because boundaries are deeply personal and they just are always about safety.
Yeah.
They're never about controlling another person's behavior. So boy, when I start looking into myself and thinking, boy, I should stop giving my adults unsolicited advice. They don't like that. I should probably stop taking hugs. Those are things that I had to really check in with myself. And then I am super aware when my space is being, and I can very easily move back. I don't have to say, I set a boundary. You can't. Not all boundaries need to be vocalized. Why we feel like we have to do that. I just have to, everybody, I have boundaries. But if I were to really just know, I'm probably not going to answer text during the day when I'm doing this and that. Not because I don't love, I just can't do it. I'm distracted and can't do my work. That's what healthy looks like.
Yeah.
I'm looking at myself and doing, the best thing. So I'm glad you brought that up. And you're right. Sometimes we get our little fix from the internet, or we get our little things about
in the wrong hands. If I'm researching on the internet and it's like, oh, you need to establish boundaries. I'm like, okay, here's what I need to do. I'm going to lay down the law, tell my wife I can't do this, and you got to do this, and boom, I'm in control. I'm establishing boundaries, and suddenly what I'm really doing is building a big brick wall between me and my spouse. Exactly the opposite of what is going to help. And so I could see boundaries, if used improperly, could harm a relationship instead of help it. And so
because they're not boundaries.
Right. And I think that's the thing, is misunderstanding.
We should have had you on the first season instead of the fourth season. Kim.
Well, it's so interesting. I call them, I just have these, I'm just like one of these weird people that I see a lot of visual things. I have to see it visually, but I always call them boundary burritos. I'm like, you think it's going to be a tasty burrito, and then you bite into it and you're like, oh, that's a burrito. That's not a boundary, y'all. That's not what you think. Don't bite into that. Because if we don't know ourselves, there's no way we're going to know what, you know what I mean? So I always tell people, if you want to get healthy within your relationships, look inward first, always. How do I show up to this relationship, to this situation, and then go from there. And once you start really gaining insight into yourself, then you'll be able to do those. I work really heavily in the addiction world. I work with sex addicts and their partners. Specifically, my PhD is in clinical sexology, and I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. Sounds like a big mouthful, but I work with people who have problematic sexual behaviors that can't seem to stop doing that, and their partners who are, understandably devastated by that. And it is very interesting as both the addict and the partner start to learn what's healthy and not healthy for them in the relationship. Clearly, this is the type of relationship that will require a lot of safety, because so much has been violated, that when the partner finally figures out, I love you and I want you to get better, but I can no longer do A, B, and C, because it takes me out, it's too much. I can't give that much. But it's loving, it's clear, it's concise. That's what we're helping. That's what we have to get to in a relationship. I love you, or I really want to connect with you. Can we do it a different way?
You have to mean it.
And we have to get past the trauma, right? We have to get past the crisis before we can get there.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just a bunch of control. Don't talk to me like that. Don't call me.
I have a gal that has shared a little bit about some marriage counseling that they've been in for, I don't know, a couple of years now. And oh my gosh, I wish they were going to you. This is so, I don't know. It would have been so much more beneficial than maybe some of the information. And granted, I know that I'm not there. I know there were other things said, but the bulk of what she's hearing is so different than what you're saying.
Right. Well, and then so it could be a therapist that doesn't have an understanding of a specific thing, and they're going off their best,
Yeah.
And as therapists, we have to be super, 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 super careful that our own crap isn't getting mixed in there, that we check in our biases. That's another thing I would ask the therapist if I was interviewing them. Let's say I was dealing with betrayal trauma. Maybe I've been cheated on. Do you have any personal connection or opinion about this? Like that could alter your ability to without bias treat me or my spouse, because
Like what they ask before you go on jury duty. And you're out.
And a good therapist would probably say, yeah, I hate the fact you've been cheated on, but I can totally understand the humanity in people's decisions, and I can be here. And if I can't, I'll let you know. If I
Yeah.
start to get mad or I start to want to move you away from him or something, I will check in my biases. That's a promise that I can make.
Can I ask you, so these are a couple questions that we repeatedly get, and one in particular that I got recently that I badly want to give great advice to this dear listener, but she is living, she's been married for many, many years. They have grown kids together, and but her husband lives with mental illness, but does not want to get help. He doesn't manage it. He doesn't believe that he has it. He doesn't think that there's a problem. And this dear gal has been living with us for so many years and trying so hard to keep other people from finding out about it as well, because he doesn't want people to know about it. She's kind of at her wit's end. I obviously, like, this is so far beyond the scope of any advice I could give. What would be your recommendation for that?
Well, obviously we deal with it until we can't deal with it anymore. That's just how we are. Obviously, and everybody, I call this, I have this, again, another metaphor, sorry, but like on a boat, they have what's called the plimsoll line on a boat, which means it's the load level that boat can take, the weight before it starts taking on water. I am always shocked at the variety of plimsoll line as I work with people. One person can handle 1 year of that, 1 week of that, and another person handles 35 years. I can never determine somebody's plimsoll line. I feel bad for this lady. Like, she probably, I mean, one of the risks in being one-sided, the relationship, and say she were to get help, even with a pro-dependent based therapist,
Yeah.
I mean, the best thing she can do is keep herself, stay healthy and keep herself grounded and in the best place she can do. But that doesn't, I mean, she's with somebody who doesn't want to work on something that's obviously injuring the relationship. Maybe, if she takes care of herself, she'll be able to continue to deal with it until she can't anymore. And so if I was working with someone like that, I would say, I can help you, but a risk of you kind of getting better and understanding how this is affecting you is you might not want to do it anymore. So you might think about that before you start unpacking all of this. I have done that many times with partners whose other partner does not want to acknowledge a very obvious problem. So I join with them. I'm so sorry. How can I help you? Can't help you and him, but I can help you.
Yeah.
Until you're ready to make some sort of decision or not.
Yeah.
I guess we're trying to do it from the other side through the podcast, is talking about how important it is. If you value your marriage, do something about it. You don't expect, take it seriously, do the work. It's too much to leave it unaddressed and
I like, there's a couple sides of that. Like, I wanted to be better for myself because I want a better life and I'm willing to put in the work. Some people aren't quite there yet. And so maybe if you start off like, I love you and okay, I'm willing to try for you. I mean, hopefully it gets to the point where, I absolutely, like, yes, I want this for me and I want this for you. But no matter where you start, whether it's yourself or the other person, like, you got to start. You can't just be like, no, it's not. It's a problem. No, it's not. No, really it is. No, it's not. Like,
well, I agree.
okay.
And I agree. And I think too, when you start getting help and getting clear yourself, it is a natural invitation to the other person. There's kind of an organic invitation of, look, I want to improve. I want to get better. But it takes two to tango. It really does. And in a relationship, nothing is sadder as a marriage therapist or someone who does that than to see a one-sided, somebody with an oar and the other person not, and they're just rowing away and they're going in circles and in the relationship. And that I feel very sad about that. But, we don't control other people. We control ourselves, and we just have to decide, what my line is. How much weight can I take on before I'm taking on water and sinking too?
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's good advice. Just realizing you can't control what he does.
I'm in charge of me. It's like the toddler rule. We just had our grandson living with us for the past few months. You can only be in charge of yourself. You can't make the dog do something. The dog does what it wants to do. You can be in charge of you, though. That's it.
But it's been interesting over the years, different couples, and to see in those situations, I've seen cases where one just says, okay, I'm just going to be as healthy as I can be in the relationship. And the other recognizes they're stagnant and they're not putting in their effort, and they're maybe begrudgingly or whatever, but they pick up the pace. And then there are those that go just the opposite. They just, which are sad, but like you said, I mean, all we control is ourselves.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying step forward and sort of set the example by doing the work yourself, and they either follow or they don't, and then you have a decision.
And at least you feel better, and you're doing all you can. Because the worst thing when you make those kind of relational decisions, maybe to get out of a relationship or whatever, you don't want to make those with any doubts or regret. You want to do everything you can on your end to do what, to be true to yourself and to the relationship. Then you can make those decisions. It'll still be painful and difficult, but you will have known you did everything in your power.
Yeah.
Which is, it's not a big consolation, but it is better than living with the what ifs, because I made some emotional reactionary decision.
Yeah, that's so wise. Kim, it's been amazing to have you on and talk to you. It's been so enjoyable. And not only did we have such a wonderful time the night we met you at the Hope Gives Gala and your fabulous husband, but it's been an enjoyable conversation now. So thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. I love it. I love this stuff, as you can tell. I love talking about it. Any platform I can get to give maybe a few listening ears a little hope or a different way to look at something would be 100% worth it.
So how can people find you?
And the easiest way to find me is through our website, probably. Familystrategies.org is the work in Mesa. I am the executive director there, one of the executive directors, and all my contact information is there. That's the easiest way to find me. All of our programs are there. We have some amazing, amazing programs. So we do all the Brene Brown groups there, the Daring Greatly and Writing Strong groups. We have a trained therapist that does those that are spectacular. Our SABRE, Sex Addiction and Betrayal Recovery Program, very robust for couples who are dealing with that. We have even SABRE groups for Band of Brothers, our high school age teenage boys who are struggling with compulsive sexual behavior, and our tribe group, which is 18 to 25-year-old single men in college who issues just are a little bit different that are around that. So we have a marriage works class for Gottman marriage stuff. We just have great programming. So familystrategies.org, check us out.
Oh, thank you so much. Everybody go there. Everybody go there, and you're going to want Kim. I mean, gosh, this has been wonderful. Thank you again for being on.
You're welcome. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you for coming back again and again. If you like this podcast, rate it and share it with a friend. If you think somebody would specifically benefit, especially from Dr. Bucks, not us, Dr. Bucks, the real life Dr. Bucks, her message, share this one with them. This is such valuable content. I'm so excited to be able to give this to our listeners with these specific questions. So if you have topics you'd like to see covered or questions that you would like to have answered, you can submit them on Instagram at mentalillness.warrior or on our website, mentalillnesswarrior.com. As always, thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Oh my God.